You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Hello and welcome to Round 5, Week 4, Season 4 here at the Eternal Tournament Series. My name is Truedawn, and as always, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Bairdrus.
Hey, what's up, everybody? We're bringing you Round 5 coverage. We're going to have two of our newer players on the circuit. Well, one of our newer players. ManuS has been around for a little bit, and ManuS, generally a Stonescar player, bringing out the old Burn Queen, which we haven't seen a lot of in a recent memory. People have been kind of shying away from it as of late. Yeah, not been as popular of a deck, but still very, very potent. Can do quite a lot of damage, and is one of those decks that can get off to those early blazing starts we were kind of talking about in the Chalice matchup, which may have influenced ManuS to bring it here.
Yeah, this is certainly one of the decks that can pressure Chalice very heavily early and just run them out of the gym. Chalice does have game against them. They have like a bunch of healing, but for this particular matchup, he will be against Big Combre, which this is like kind of just like the bread and butter matchup of the format. Just like Stonescar versus Combre. It's like the aggro deck versus the mid-range deck. This is just as simple as it gets.
Yeah, it really is, and we'll see how this goes over. I mean, Stonescar can beat Big Combre if they have a great opening draw and they're fast. And ManuS is playing the faster version of Burn Queen. I mean, he's even playing cards like Knife Jack. Like, he's trying to get under these big and mid-range style Combre decks as well as the Chalice deck. So he definitely can have very profitable draws versus babamavs, but babamavs is still on Big Combre. It's still a very threatening deck, and it can scale out very well. And if you can't beat it early, you're certainly not going to beat it late.
Yeah, it's just that Mono needs to get the game over with pretty quickly. The longer it goes, the more it favors babamavs, as you said. And I do think that the way Mono has built this deck is incredibly low to the ground. He has 12 one-drops. Actually, more than that. 14, sorry. So it's this build of it should be able to get underneath Big Combre. There are other more mid-range versions of Stonescar that may have a harder time. But I do think that the way Mono is constructing this deck, he should be able to get underneath his opponent here. And we will see if that comes to fruition as we move here into Game 1.
Yeah, and ManuS has a very, very strong start here. Although babamavs on the other side does have the Combre Healer and the Scorpion Wasp, and those are two very, very key cards in this matchup.
Yeah, those matter a lot. Anything that's going to prevent the creatures from dealing repeatable damage, because that's like the important part. All the burn spells don't matter if they're not like coming together for lethal, and the way they can do that is by creatures like getting their opponent down to an low enough life total. If you can prevent the creatures from doing damage early, then the burn spells later aren't relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. If your goal as the Big Combre player is to blunt all this early aggression, and fortunately for babamavs, he definitely has a solid hand for it. This Champion to Chaos might throw a slight wrench in the plans, though. The Scorpion Wasp is certainly threatening towards it, but with the Rapid Shot hanging out in ManuS's hand, assuming that he attacks first, which he of course will, he can capitalize on this, and the Scorpion Wasp is going to get negated and a ton of damage getting pushed through here. Should be
this is gross.
10 damage in total, I believe.
Yeah, now the whole thing I was talking about where like you can't let the creatures do enough damage to make the burn relevant, that's out the window. They did enough damage to make the burn relevant. And they're not done. This Champion of Chaos is going to get in for at least another 4, and then that's going to allow the champion to get in, or the outlaw to get in for at least another 2. And yeah, I do think that these creatures have done their job, and this Flame Blast might be able to close the distance. Although, interesting block there on the side of babamavs.
Yeah, I certainly think that this is going to do it. ManuS has the Flame Blast next turn for 5 damage. He only needs to push 3 through here. The Combre Healer will give him some life back, certainly, but there will still be a ton of damage coming through. And with the Suffocate coming down, he can still push some extra damage here. Stonescar Banner picked up. Very nice here. Going to allow him to get in that extra damage. Kind of curious that he didn't play it pre-combat. Not that it's really going to matter, but better safe than sorry in all cases. And not even going to need the extra power off it. ManuS going to be able to close the game out. And that is the kind of draw that we were talking about at the top that ManuS needs to have if he wants to beat the Big Combri player. That is how you get underneath of them and make it so that there is no possible way for them to scale to that late game and actually take over the matchup.
Yeah, and that was like kind of the perfect draw for Manu. We saw like he ended with 0 cards in hand. His opponent like almost died to exactly lethal. It was 1 over. So like perfect amount of damage done by Manu there. And for the sideboard, I think that he gets some tools that can help him. ManuS specifically is pretty good against Combray. Potentially Annihilate and Suffocate, depending upon what creatures he's concerned about. But I do think that there's going to be very light sideboarding, if any, on the side of Manu.
Yeah, we do see him bringing in extra copies of Suffocate, Annihilate, and bringing in his copy of ManuS. One of his copies of ManuS. And ManuS is a very cool card in this matchup. Can definitely swing the board heavily in your favor against Big Combri. Big Combri often relying on cards like Sandstorm Titan to help blunt that aggression on the early turns. And if you can steal a Sandstorm Titan away on an empty board and beat your opponent down for 5, as a very, very solid trade, not only because you are getting the 5 damage from their Sandstorm Titan, but generally you're opening up the floodgates for your creatures to get in on the same swing.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess on the side of Big Combray, we can see what kind of tools that babamavs is bringing here. We do see Protect, Awakened Student, Decay, Stand Together, Healer's Cloak, and Harsh Roll, and Regati Warden.
Yeah, and I would definitely like to see cards like Healer's Cloak coming in. I generally like Awakened Student coming in on the side of Big Combri. I think them converting to more of an early aggressive deck themselves can help them out. Generally, when you're playing this matchup, as we've mentioned, multiple times here, it's about stopping the creatures from hitting your face. And if you can prevent all the units from dealing a ton of damage to you, that is really the most important part, especially after sideboard where you're going to have Protect to protect yourself from the Flame Blast. And in fact, we do see originally 4 copies of Awakened Student coming in for babamavs, now reconsidering.
Yeah, I do think the Awakened Students are good, not even as early attackers, just as like early things to do, early blockers, something that can potentially trade with an Ardent Instigator or a Champion of Chaos. Again, as we talked about, the most important thing in this matchup is just making it so the creatures don't connect often enough to make the burn relevant, and Awakened Student certainly helps in that regard. And there are a lot of other things that do something similar in this deck. So I would like to see some of the top end come out, some of like the Mystic Ascendants, potentially Great Parliaments, Stand Together certainly, and for more early interaction and Healer's Cloak. All that stuff should help a lot with not only blunting the burn specifically, but also preventing the creatures from doing enough damage where the burn is actually relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the players are, just locking in their sideboards really quick. ManuS has figured out his game plan. babamavs still taking a little bit of consideration. Not really sure why he wants a Reality Warden in too much. I don't think there's really any recursion in the deck from ManuS. I mean, it is a very solid big threat, but it is a little slow in this matchup. And, as we've touched on, slow is definitely not something you can afford to be.
Yeah, and you want to be sideboarding in anything that costs more than like 3. Unless it's Healer's Cloak. Healer's Cloak is impact enough. But we'll see how it works out as players are now queuing into the game. And I still do think that I would give the edge to Manu. babamavs did get some things real sideboarding, but I don't think it's going to be enough. His deck is incredibly low to the ground. It's incredibly focused. We'll see how it works out.
Yeah, certainly. This will come down to how great both of these players' mulligans are. And we see babamavs does have a very, very solid mulligan here. So that is definitely to his credit. And ManuS not with the best, even, kind of saying not what I had in mind. Certainly not exactly what he had in mind. Granted and Drone off the top, though, definitely helps to smooth that out.
Yeah, just having like anything in play to attack early is good. The Awakened Student will blunt this a bit, but the Suffocate could help out with that. We'll probably see that there just to push through 2 damage. And then we do see that Manu has a pretty good curve of either Champion of Chaos or Assembly Line on turn 3 into the other one on turn 4, and then 2 Flame Blasts to clean it up.
Yeah, something interesting to note that fortunately babamavs was able to recover from was he did not have a second time influence up to that point. He had used Seek Power on turn 1 to pick up a second Justice influence to try and ensure that he hit Harsh Rule, but did not have a second time influence to play Temple Scribe or Sandstorm Titan. Could have caused him quite a problem, but was able to pick up a depleted banner that turn. And out comes this Sandstorm Titan. And this is going to stonewall ManuS just a little bit for the time being. Not a lot he can really interact with this.
Yeah, and this is actually going to force Manu to go wide, trying to get around the Sandstorm Titan to set up a Bandit Queen. And in the process of that, he might overextend into this Harsh Rule we see on the side of babamavs, which he doesn't currently have enough power to cast. But that could change, and Manu's not going to have really great attacks until then. I mean, he's going to trade a 1/1 for 3 damage, which is certainly reasonable. And I guess babamavs is okay with that too. But it's very possible that we see Manu keep extending, trying to set up a decent Bandit Queen, and just get savaged by this Harsh Rule.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Harsh Rule at any point will just kind of take care of his whole board. I'm curious to see if babamavs will just throw it down this turn, or if he's just going to keep establishing. And establishing is certainly not a bad idea here. I mean, the Cumber Healer gains him life, and it is just a very solid card all around. Finally, ManuS pulls the trigger on this Bandit Queen, though.
Yeah, I think that this is as much value as it's going to get, and it's a bunch of value. He's going to get for 4, 6, 10 damage, and he has 3 Flame Blasts in hand. So Manu's in a pretty good spot. The Cumber Healer alone was not enough to bring him out of range of this, although if Manu doesn't draw any more power, these 3 Flame Blasts are 1 short of lethal.
Yeah, not only are they 1 short of lethal, but babamavs the whole time is, cracking away, and he has started to present quite a deadly clock of his own. Fortunately for ManuS, he was able to pick up another power, but that gives him a 3-turn clock versus babamavs, who can create an even faster clock than that.
He needs to be careful about how much he attacks with, because the Flame Blast plus like a 1/1 sneaking by could potentially be lethal. But I do agree he needs to put on a bunch of pressure, and I think that this attack is likely the best way to do it. He can afford to lose 1 blocker, gets to deploy the additional Sandstorm Titan, likely on tap, and maybe kill Manu the next turn.
Yeah, it depends on if he swings in here with the Combrial. He certainly needs to attack with the Combrial here and force at least 2 jump blocks off. Or 1 jump block is fine. Well, it's kind of fine anyway. It might provide him enough damage. ManuS picks up a Suffocate, though. This is actually not super critical. Really, his game plan at this point looks like it's going to be to hurl Flame Blast at the face.
Yeah, and he's going to need to do a bunch of chump blocking, likely for his whole board. And depending upon like how scared he is about a protect, although I'm not sure how much he can play around at this point. We'll see how the blocks go for Manu. There's choices here based upon how much you want to get wrecked by a protect.
Yeah, and it looks like he's just going to throw the whole board away and play around the idea that, he can't dodge protect. And fortunately for Manu, it's going to pay off. I mean, he's going to end up taking the series down 2-0 with 2 very quick games. I mean, triple Flame Blast is it's a little disgusting on his side there. Able to bring his opponent down quite cleanly.
There was a turn for babamavs where he top decked the power to cast a Harsh Rule, and I do think that if he fired it off there, he would have been in a much better spot. Although I don't think not Harsh Ruling there was like objectively incorrect. It was a close decision, and he decided to be a little bit more greedy, and it ended up not working out. The Bandit Queen was able to come down and get value that it otherwise would not have gotten had the Harsh Rule come down on the turn.
Yeah, I have to agree there as well. The Bandit Queen provided him a ton of value that he wasn't able to deal with, and even if the Bandit Queen hadn't come down, there was still a ton of chip damage that was able to be attained by Manu in that situation. So I think babamavs absolutely did have to fire off that Harsh Rule. But as you said, I mean, it wasn't necessarily objectively worse. If it wasn't for 3 Flame Blasts in ManuS' hand, it's very likely that babamavs would have won that series, or at least won that game. So not quite coming together for him, but ManuS showing a very impressive 2-0 there.
Yep. And I do believe we have a backup match between SMJ and Falcon Control and tvkelley on the traditional armory we saw earlier. We are in the middle of a game that has gone pretty late. We will get you information on which game this is. It is game 3. So both players appear to be in top deck mode. SMJ has just established a staff of stories, and we'll see if that can stick, but the Stone Scar Maul is going to say no.
Oh, and Stone Scar Maul is such a hard card for the Felon Control player to beat. I mean, you really can't do much against it. Certainly not when it's buffed up to an 8-5. As a 6-3, you possibly can find ways to deal with it, such as throwing down like a Black Sky Harbinger and letting it be eaten. But this is definitely going to chunk 1 or 2 of SMJ's units. And if SMJ can't find another unit, this Stone Scar Maul will likely close out the whole game for him.
Yep, Pavara's Favor makes a little bit of forward progress in the armor total, not making any top deck creature trade with the Stone Scar Maul, but he's going to need to draw one pretty soon because this is presenting a 3-turn clock. Never mind what other things tvkelley may have in hand.
Yeah, Shadowlands Feaster, that's a solid card. I mean, it will die to the Stone Scar Maul, but it will at least catch tvkelley by surprise and allow him to stop himself from dying straight to the Stone Scar Maul alone. That being said, there is a pause here. tvkelley almost assuredly has a torch then, but doesn't have any follow-up weapon. Not that he necessarily would want to establish it straight up in that case.
Yep. And we do see a pause here, and there is a protect. Interesting. Using a protect on the Steward of the Past enters the battlefield trigger. For those who don't know, Steward of the Past has 2 separate abilities. The passive ones that affects the passive effect that affects things dying on the board, and enters the battlefield trigger that affects things that are currently in the graveyard. tvkelley choosing to protect his face in order to save the things he has in the graveyard that he can potentially buy back later with Smuggler Stash.
Yeah, and he likely will need to buy them back. This game has kind of turned on its head just a little bit. tvkelley not having a lot really going for him in his hand. SMJ picks up a Rain of Frogs, and Double Harsh Rule was the cards in tvkelley's hand. That clears the way for SMJ to throw this Death Strike at the Valkyrie Enforcer and start pushing in.
I think tvkelley might be happier with the frogs. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he might actually be in this case. And an Auric Runehammer, a very solid pickup for him. Definitely with the 2 frogs coming down now. SMJ going to have a unit off the top of the deck. Celestial Omen.
Well, that's anything.
Yeah, that is anything in this case. What does anything get you? He does have Lightning Strike.
Channel the Tempest seems pretty good. Last Word, not as good in the spot. Black Sky Harbinger. A lot of options. I think that I would probably take Channel the Tempest, but there's certainly an argument for several different cards here. Thunderstrike Dragon also is good. It is big enough to not die to the Auric Runehammer.
Yeah, I think Thunderstrike Dragon would be my pick here. I like Channel the Tempest because it draws you some value, but you do have the consideration where you're taking 7 damage this turn guaranteed before any other cards tvkelley actually gets to play. And if you have Channel the Tempest and you go towards face, you're committing your whole turn just take the weapon down, which is going to put you on 1 on the following turn with 2 1/1s on the board.
Yeah, we do see tvkelley elect to do the super conservative option of Harbinger, and tvkelley did get the Smuggler Stash, so that's a problem.
Yeah, that may in fact just be
It depends upon how aggressive tvkelley wants to deploy weapons. If he Stone Scar Mauls, it likely will be. We'll have to see. Depends upon how far tvkelley wants to shove all in.
Yeah, that is true. We are going to see the Valkyrie Enforcer likely come down and silence off this Black Sky Harbinger, which will allow tvkelley to punch through, not actually giving his opponent any life and creating a situation where he should be able to close out the game next turn with pretty much any weapon he wants to establish and arise to the challenge just to rub it in. Likely going to go get an Akaria. Akaria going to be lethal here on the crack. And a Zendel's Gift a turn late.
We see SMJ lamenting his fate, angrily waving about the Azendel's Gift.
Yeah, and 1 turn late on that Azendel's Gift. That would have turned the tide of the matchup very likely, but not going to happen there for SMJ, losing a very tough game 3 there to the Armory player. A matchup Armory is generally heavily favored in, though, so not too surprising, all things considered. It's very hard for the Felon control decks to deal with relic weapons. They really are just quite a nuisance for a deck like Felon Control that's not slamming a bunch of units on the board and also doesn't have any immediate way to handle relic weapons, such as Ruin or Decay.
Yeah, it's a very rough matchup. All the weapons line up exceptionally well versus the creatures. They don't have any normal removal, as you said, that really deals with it. So it's Azendel's Gift is one of the ways you can steal that matchup. And unfortunately, it came a little bit too late for SLM or SMJ.
Yeah, just a little bit too late, but that's okay. He'll have another crack at his what I believe is going to be a win and in for him next round. tvkelley should be advancing on to either 4-1 or 5-0 there. I believe 4-1. So he also will be playing a win and in the following round. Very likely to make it in with his Armory deck. So congratulations to him. tvkelley's 3-2 now. Okay, so tvkelley is going to be on the one playing for a win and in next round with the Armory deck. So yeah, congratulations to him for moving on to his possible win in match. And that is all for the current round, folks. But before I let you all go, head on down if you guys are looking for any Eternal information. Go on down to www.rngeternal.com. That's www.rng, the letters, eternal.com. You can find daily articles by some of the fantastic players we have here on staff, such as Lights Out Ace, Loco Pojo. We also got Rick Henner and Neon, of course, writing articles, as well as aReNGee, our namesake. All fantastic content. You can check that out. We got ranked tier list and stock list in case you want to take a look at what the current meta looks like, or just find a new deck to play. You can check those out as well. We got draft pick orders up, and of course, we have tournament information. So if you are interested in getting involved in the Eternal Tournament series, or you just want to take a look at the streaming schedule to know what's going on as far as Eternal streaming content is concerned, check it out at www.rngeternal.com. That is going to take care of us for round 5, though. We will be back in just a few moments with coverage of our final round of the Swiss stages before our cut to top 8. So stay tuned. Do not go anywhere, folks. We will be back momentarily.